Summer, 1984. A sprawling mansion outside Atlanta. George's youngest self-made son lies dying in his own home, surrounded by 10 of the state's leading doctors. They've run every test, explored every diagnosis, prescribed every treatment, and still he's slipping away. What could kill a man with unlimited resources and the best medical mind's money could by standing at his bedside? The answer came from the one person in that house nobody was listening to, the one person everyone had learned to overlook. This is the story of how a housemaid saved a CEO's life and changed everything. Before we dive in, think about this for a second. Have you ever noticed something crucial that everyone else completely missed? Or maybe you've had important concerns dismissed simply because of who you are, your job, your background, your place in the pecking order? It happens more than we like to admit. The truth is sitting right there in plain sight. But the people with credentials, the power, the expensive suits, they're too busy looking at complex solutions to see the obvious answer. So let me ask you, what would you do if you knew the truth but nobody would listen? Drop a comment if you've ever been in that position. And stick around, because this story will remind you why paying attention matters more than any degree on a wall. Atlanta in 1984 was a city of new money and old traditions. Corporate towers climbing toward the sky, mansions spreading across manicure estates where families like the Whitmans lived behind gates and privilege. Gregor Whitman had built his fortune from nothing. A self-made CEO at 32, the kind of success story that made magazine covers and inspired business school case studies. His mansion reflected that success. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and now, tragically, a private hospital suite where he lay dying while servants moved like ghosts through hallways and doctors debated in hushed, frustrated tones. It happened during a routine board meeting on a Tuesday afternoon in June. Gregor was mid-sentence, discussing quarterly projections, when his words started to slur. His vice president noticed first. The way Gregor gripped the edge of the conference table, knuckles white, face draining of color. "Sir? Mr. Whitman?" Then he collapsed. Just dropped, right there in the boardroom, surrounded by executives who could do nothing but watch in horror and call for help. The initial fear was heart attack. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors ran cardiac tests, brain scans, blood work. Everything came back inconclusive. Not a heart attack, not a stroke. Something else, something they couldn't name. Within days, the Whitman family made a decision: bring the medical care to him. They converted a wing of the mansion into a private hospital suite. Monitors beeping, for stands gleaming, nurses on rotating shifts. If Gregor was going to fight this mystery illness, he'd do it at home. The parade of specialists began. Neurologists examining nerve function, cardiologists studying heart rhythms, toxicologists searching for poisons, infectious disease experts looking for rare pathogens. 10 doctors in total, each with impressive credentials and confident theories. Nerve inflammation, one said. Stress-induced autonomic collapse, suggested another. An undetected autoimmune condition, a rare metabolic disorder. Each diagnosis led to treatments that did nothing. Expensive medications, cutting-edge therapies, experimental protocols. And Gregor kept getting worse. His skin took on a grayish pallor. His energy drained day by day. His family watched helplessly as the man who'd built an empire from his bare hands couldn't even lift a glass of water without trembling. The mystery deepened. The doctors grew frustrated. And everyone kept asking the same question: what could be killing a previously healthy man with access to the best medical care in the world? While doctors conferred and family members worried, one person moved to the mansion the way she had for nearly a decade. Quietly, efficiently, almost invisibly. Marjorie Gates was 53 years old, a widow from Savannah who'd come to Atlanta after losing her husband to cancer, looking for steady work and a fresh start. The Whitmans had hired her as a housemaid in 1975, and she'd been there ever since, cleaning, tidying, maintaining order in a household that barely registered her presence. She wasn't bitter about that invisibility. It was simply how things worked. Rich families didn't really see their staff, not as full people with thoughts and observations and lives beyond their uniforms. Marjorie moved through rooms while important conversations happened, dusted furniture while decisions that affected thousands were made, and generally existed in that peculiar space occupied by those who serve. But here's what nobody understood about Marjorie. Invisibility meant she saw everything. She noticed which family members were genuinely worried and which were already calculating inheritance. She observed how the doctors postured for each other, more concerned with not looking foolish than admitting uncertainty. She watched how everyone rushed to test, rushed to diagnose, rushed to treat, without ever just stopping to really look. The class dynamics were stark. Doctors in expensive suits, stethoscopes like badges of authority, speaking in technical language that made them sound infallible. Marjorie in her simple uniform, carrying cleaning supplies, expected to remain silent unless directly addressed. Nobody asked the maid what she thought. Nobody imagined she might have insight. She was there to clean the room where important people tried to solve the mystery, not to solve it herself. But Marjorie had something those specialists didn't. She'd been watching Gregor Whitman for nearly 10 years. She knew this house inside and out. She understood rhythms and routines. And most importantly, she paid attention to the small things, because her job had always been about noticing details everyone else overlooked. So when she started seeing something strange in Gregor's condition, something none of the medical professionals had caught, she faced a choice: stay silent as expected, or speak up knowing she'd likely be dismissed. The weight of being overlooked is heavy, but the weight of staying silent when you know something's wrong, that's unbearable. It was early morning, maybe 6 o'clock, when Marjorie entered Gregor's suite to begin her daily cleaning. The night nurse had just left. Gregor was awake but exhausted, propped up against pillows, staring at nothing. Marjorie worked quietly, the way she always did, dusting the monitors, straightening the bedside table, emptying the small wastebasket. Gregor barely acknowledged her presence. She was used to that. Then the day nurse arrived with his morning water. Fresh pitcher from the kitchen, poured into his glass. Gregor took a sip, then another, and that's when Marjorie saw it. His fingertips, the very tips of his fingers, they turned bluish, just slightly, just for a moment, then faded back to their normal, sickly pale. She almost dismissed it, a trick of the morning light, maybe her eyes playing games. But something made her keep watching. The next morning, she paid closer attention. Same routine. Water from the kitchen. Gregor drinking. And there it was again, that subtle blue tinge to his fingertips. Cyanosis, though Marjorie didn't know the medical term. She just knew it wasn't right. She started tracking it. Every time he drank water, brought from the kitchen, the same thing happened. Not with juice. Not with broth. Just water. Her mind went to the filtration system. The Whitmans had installed a state-of-the-art water filter years ago, something that supposedly purified every drop that came through the taps. Expensive, high-tech, the kind of thing rich people bought and then never thought about again. But what if something was wrong with it? What if the very thing meant to keep the water clean was actually contaminating it? Marjorie knew what she saw. More importantly, she trusted her own observation over what was supposed to be true. Rich people love their expensive solutions, but expensive didn't always mean effective. Sometimes things broke. Sometimes systems failed. And sometimes the answer was simpler than anyone wanted to admit. The moment of decision came on a Thursday evening. She could stay silent, keep cleaning, keep watching, keep being invisible. Or she could speak up, knowing full well how that usually went for people like her. Imagine knowing something crucial, but being terrified that no one will take you seriously, that your insight will be dismissed before you even finish your sentence, that speaking up might cost you your job, your security, everything you worked for. That's exactly where Marjorie stood. If you've ever had to choose between safety and doing what's right, hit that like button and drop a comment about trusting your instincts even when the odds are stacked against you. That night, Marjorie approached a family nurse, a woman named Patricia, who'd been hired specifically for Gregor's care. Patricia was professional, efficient, and very clear about the chain of command. Nurses reported to doctors. Doctors made decisions. Everyone else stayed in their lane. "Excuse me, Miss Patricia, Marjorie said softly, catching her in the hallway. "I wonder if I could mention something I've noticed about Mr. Whitman." Patricia turned, already half distracted by her charts. "Yes. It's about the water. I think there might be something wrong with the filter system. I've noticed his fingertips turn blue when he drinks water from the kitchen, and I wondered if the water." Patricia's expression was polite but skeptical. "Marjorie, the doctors have run every conceivable test. They've analyzed his blood, his tissues, everything. If there was environmental contamination, they would have found it." "Yes, ma'am, but I just thought—" "The filtration system is top of the line. It was installed by professionals and serviced regularly. I appreciate your concern, but I think we should leave the medical observations to the medical staff." The dismissal was gentle but absolute. The unspoken message rang clear. "You're just a maid. What could you possibly know that 10 doctors don't?" Patricia walked away, already putting Marjorie's suggestion out of her mind. Marjorie stood in that hallway, facing a choice. She could accept the dismissal, tell herself she'd tried, go back to being invisible, and hope someone else would eventually figure it out. Or she could push forward, even if it meant overstepping every boundary that defined her place in this house. The risk was real. She could lose her job, be seen as troublesome, ruin the quiet life she'd built in the decades since her husband's death. But upstairs, a man was dying, and she knew what was killing him. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to stay silent, even when silence would be so much easier. Marjorie made her decision over breakfast the next morning, sitting alone in her small apartment. If they wouldn't listen, she'd prove it. But how? She couldn't just demand the doctors test the water. She didn't have that kind of authority. She couldn't go to the Whitman family directly. They defer to the medical professionals. She needed evidence, real evidence that couldn't be dismissed. Then she remembered. Her neighbor's cousin, Thomas, worked for the Atlanta Water Department. They'd met a few times at community gatherings. He was a water quality inspector, someone who understood testing and contamination. It wasn't official channels. It wasn't proper protocol. But it was something. The next morning, Marjorie did something she'd never done in 10 years of service. She took something from the Whitman house. A small sample of water from Gregor's pitcher, carefully transferred into a clean jar she brought from home, sealed tight, and slipped into her bag. Her hands shook as she left the mansion that evening. What if someone had seen her? What if they thought she was stealing? What if she was completely wrong, and this was all for nothing? That night, she called Thomas, explained the situation as clearly as she could, the dying so, the baffled doctors, her observation about the water, the dismissal she'd received. She asked, voice trembling, if there was any way he could test the sample, off the books, as a favor. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then, bring it by tomorrow. I'll run it through our equipment. The waiting was agony. 3 days while Thomas ran tests in between his official duties. 3 days of watching Gregor deteriorate further, his skin graying, his breathing more labored. 3 days of second-guessing herself, wondering if she crossed the line for nothing. 3 days of carrying the weight of knowledge that might save a life or might just be the delusion of a housemaid who'd forgotten her place. Marjorie cleaned Gregor's room each morning, her heart breaking as she watched him fade. The doctors continued their consultations, their tests, their confident theories that led nowhere, and she kept her mouth shut, waiting for proof that would either vindicate her or humiliate her. The guilt gnawed at her. What if she was wrong? What if she was wasting precious time? But also, what if she was right and her silence meant his death? The phone call came on a Monday evening. Thomas's voice was urgent, almost shocked. Marjorie, where did you get this water sample? Her heart stopped. From the house where I work. Why? What did you find? There's chemical contamination, significant levels, heavy metals leaching from what looks like a degraded filter system. This water has been poisoning whoever's been drinking it, slowly, cumulatively. How long has this person been ill? Weeks. Almost 2 months now. Jesus. Marjorie, this is serious. This could kill someone. You need to tell someone immediately. Her hands trembled as she held the phone. She'd been right. All along, she'd been right. The filter, that expensive, state-of-the-art system the Whitmans had trusted implicitly, had degraded somehow, developed a leak or a crack or some failure that turned it from purifier to poison dispenser. It was subtle enough that you'd never taste it, slow-acting enough that symptoms mimicked a dozen other conditions. The kind of thing that would never show up in blood tests or tissue samples because the doctors were looking at Gregor, not at his environment. They were searching for complex medical causes when the answer was hiding in plain sight, flowing from kitchen taps into his glass. Marjorie thanked Thomas, hung up, and stared at a reflection in the darkened window. She had proof now, undeniable scientific proof. But she also knew that presenting it meant crossing every line, violating every unspoken rule about her place in the Whitman household. She could still back down, give the information to Patricia, let the nurse take credit, stay safely invisible. But Gregor Whitman was dying, and invisibility was a luxury she could no longer afford. This time, she didn't ask permission. She didn't go through channels. She walked straight into the mansion the next morning, test results in hand, and requested an immediate meeting with the Whitman family and the lead doctor. They gathered in the study, family members confused, the doctor annoyed at this interruption, everyone wondering why the housemaid had called this meeting. Marjorie laid the results on the desk. Her voice was steady as she explained what she'd observed, what she'd done, what Thomas had found. The room went silent, then erupted. The lead doctor, Dr. Harrison, a man who'd spent 30 years in medicine, picked up the test results with hands that weren't quite steady. He read them once. Then again, his face went from annoyed to shocked to something like horror. This can't be right. Are you saying the water has been contaminated for weeks, possibly months? Marjorie said quietly. And it's been poisoning Mr. Whitman every time he took a drink. Dr. Harrison's jaw clenched. He looked at the other doctors present, then back at the results. We need to verify this immediately. But if these numbers are accurate... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Within the hour, official water tests confirmed what Marjorie's sample had shown. The filtration system had developed a catastrophic failure, a corroded component leaching heavy metals directly into the supposedly purified water. Slow-acting, cumulative, mimicking neurological and cardiac symptoms that sent doctors chasing rare diseases when the answer had been flowing from the tap all along. The medical response was swift and precise. Emergency protocols to flush Gregor's system, chelation therapy to bind and remove the accumulated toxins, complete removal of the contaminated filtration system and every water line connected to it. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. After weeks of complex treatments and expensive procedures, the solution was startlingly simple. Stop poisoning the patient. Within 48 hours, the change was visible. Color returning to Gregor's face. Energy slowly rebuilding. His fingertips, those bluish fingertips that only Marjorie had noticed, returned a healthy pink. By the end of the week, he was sitting up, eating solid food, asking about his company. The decline reversed so dramatically that it seemed almost miraculous, though there was nothing miraculous about it. Just basic cause and effect. Remove the poison, the body heals. Dr. Harrison stood in Gregor's room a week after Marjorie's revelation, watching his patient improvement, and felt the full weight of professional embarrassment. They'd been so focused on sophisticated diagnoses, so convinced the answer must be complex, that they'd never thought to question the simplest environmental factor. They'd tested the patient exhaustively, but never tested his water. And it took a housemaid, someone they collectively dismissed as irrelevant to the medical process, to notice what they'd all missed. This is the moment everything changes, not just for Gregor Whitman, but for everyone watching. This is about more than one man's life. It's about who we listen to and why. Hit that subscribe button if you believe wisdom doesn't always come with credentials, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. When Gregor was strong enough to understand the full story, how he'd nearly died, how the mystery had been solved, and who had solved it, he asked to see Marjorie. She came to his suite nervously, still not entirely sure she wouldn't face consequences for overstepping her bounds. But when she entered, Gregor was sitting up in bed, looking more alive than he had in months. "Miss Gates," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion, "I'm told I owe you my life." Marjorie didn't know what to say to that. I noticed something, sir. That's all. You noticed something 10 doctors missed. And when you were dismissed, you didn't give up. Why?" She met his eyes for perhaps the first time in a decade, because it was the right thing to do, and because... She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because I've been in this house for nearly 10 years, and you're a good man. You deserve someone paying attention." The Whitman family stood in that room, his wife, his brother, his adult children, and felt the collective weight of realization. This woman had moved through their home for a decade, and they'd barely known her name. They'd looked past her, through her, around her. She'd been furniture, part of the household machinery, and she'd saved their patriarch's life. The shame was profound. So was the gratitude. But Gregor understood that gratitude wasn't enough. This had to mean something bigger. Gregor's first act upon full recovery was to sit down with Marjorie for a real conversation, not employer to employee, person to person. He learned her story, how she'd come from Savannah after her husband's death, how she'd raised 2 children alone while working multiple jobs, how she built a quiet life of dignity and service. He learned about her sharp mind, her observations, her kindness that had gone largely unnoticed for years. And he felt ashamed that it had taken nearly dying to really see someone who'd been right there all along. "I want to do something meaningful," he told her. "Something that honors what you did and helps others." Within months, the Marjorie Gates Scholarship Fund was established, a substantial endowment supporting women, particularly women from overlooked communities, women from working-class backgrounds, women who might not have traditional paths to education, pursuing careers in healthcare, nurses, doctors, researchers, technicians. The scholarship supported them all, with one requirement. Recipients had to understand that healing required more than medical knowledge. It required attention, compassion, and the willingness to listen to everyone involved in care, regardless of their title. The fund grew over the years. Dozens of women received education they couldn't otherwise afford. Many of them went on to distinguished careers, and every one of them knew Marjorie's story, knew that a housemaid had saved a CEO's life by paying attention when everyone else was too busy or too arrogant to notice. Marjorie herself stayed with the Whitman family for another decade before retiring. But everything was different. She wasn't invisible anymore. Her insights were sought. Her opinions mattered. And most importantly, she'd shown everyone in that household that wisdom has nothing to do with degrees or credentials or position. Sometimes it just takes someone who pays attention and refuses to stay silent. The story became legendary in the Whitman family, told at gatherings, shared with business partners, passed down to grandchildren who never met Marjorie but knew her name and what she represented. At every family dinner, someone inevitably mentioned the time Marjorie saved Dad's life. It became shorthand for a crucial lesson. Never dismiss someone because of their position. Never assume expertise lives only in expected places. Never let credentials blind you to obvious truth. The medical community took notice too. Gregor spoke at conferences about his experience. Articles were written in medical journals about environmental factors in mysterious illnesses, about the importance of considering simple explanations before complex ones, about listening to everyone in a patient's care environment. Hospitals began training programs emphasizing the housekeeping staff, cafeteria workers, family members, anyone who spent regular time with patients, might observe things clinical staff missed. Their input wasn't just welcome, it was essential. Protocols changed. Checklists expanded to include environmental surveys. Water testing became standard in unexplained illness cases. Marjorie's single observation rippled outward, saving countless lives by extension, all because she trusted what she saw and refused to let dismissal silence her. Years later, when Gregor was in his 60s, running his company with renewed appreciation for every day of health, he still kept a photo in his office. Marjorie at her retirement party, surrounded by family, scholarship recipients, and Whitmans. Her smile was quiet but genuine. Beneath it, a small plaque. Sometimes the most important voice in the room is the quietest one. He told everyone who asked about that photo the same thing. She taught me to see people, really see them, and that lesson saved more than just my life. It changed how I understood everything. The Marjorie Gates Scholarship Fund continues today. Her name lives on, and somewhere, embedded in medical training programs and hospital protocols, her legacy persists. Pay attention. Listen to everyone. Trust what you observe. Wisdom doesn't always announce itself with credentials. Sometimes it comes in a housemaid's uniform, speaking quietly, noticing what everyone else missed. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been dismissed because of your job title, your background, where you came from? Have you had valuable insights ignored because you weren't the right person to be sharing them? Or maybe you've been on the other side. Maybe you've been so focused on expert opinions that you missed the obvious answer right in front of you. Maybe you've overlooked someone who had exactly what you needed to hear. Share your story in the comments. Let's celebrate the Marjories of the world. The people who trust their observations, who speak up even when it's hard, who save lives by paying attention when everyone else is too busy rushing toward complex solutions. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs this reminder. Subscribe to Earthly Tales because every story we share carries a lesson worth learning. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might change how you see the world. And here's what I want you to remember. Expertise matters. Education matters. But so does simple observation. So does compassion. So does the willingness to listen to voices you might usually ignore. 10 doctors with prestigious degrees couldn't solve the mystery. One housemaid did. Not because she was smarter. Not because she had special training. But because she paid attention to the details everyone else overlooked, and she refused to stay silent when staying silent would have been safer. The world needs more people like Marjorie Gates. People who trust what they see. People who speak up for what's right even when they're afraid. People who understand that wisdom isn't found only in titles and credentials. It's found in anyone who pays attention and cares enough to act. This is Earthly Tales, reminding you that sometimes the most profound truths come from the most unexpected sources. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, the next time someone without credentials tries to tell you something important, maybe, just maybe, they're the one who's been paying attention all along. Until next time, keep your eyes open. Keep listening. Keep noticing the details others miss. You never know when you might be the one who sees what everyone else overlooked.